All right, here we go. Salute to NBA Nation on this Monday afternoon. Another edition of the NBA Report presented by Prize Picks. CP the Franchise, Alex Rotaro's here. Special guest on today's episode, it is the Minnesota Timberwolves check-in report. Minnesota will head to OKC for a battle of Western Conference supremacy. So we got to check in with our guy, friend of the show, one of our favorite guests. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for The Athletic, as well as Bally Sports. He's in front of the camera as well. He is Jon Krawczynski returning to the show. So let's get into it, man. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. Happy Monday. All right, Jon, how you feeling, man? Welcome back to the show.
I'm good, CP. Thanks for having me. Things are good here. We were just talking off camera. It's warm in Minnesota here in the winter, and so life is good, man. No complaints.
I could imagine, man. Now, for the Timberwolves, 32-14 on the campaign. Had a little bit of a rough patch last week, 2-2. They had some tough losses to the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah, on Karl Anthony Towns' 60-point performance. Then tough loss to the Spurs on Saturday night. In your book and covering this team, is this reason for concern here, or is this just a typical rough patch of a season for a team?
Yeah, I think, big picture wise, if you start the season and you say, hey, end of January, you're 32-14 and number one or number two in the West, anyone in the world in Timberwolves land would have signed up for that. Now, there is no disputing that the last week or so, the last week and a half have been a little rough. The defense has slipped a little bit. They've really had some struggles in the fourth quarters of games, closing games out against really bad teams in San Antonio and Charlotte. And so I do think that right now it feels like this team has been in the spotlight now for a couple of months and is learning what that demands of a group. And so I have a feeling like as we get a little bit closer to trade deadline, and into the All-Star break in next month, these are the dog days of the season, and a team can go through a little bit of a rough patch. And it's the really good ones that recognize it quickly, kind of adjust to it, wake up a little bit, and get back to their ways. And then it's the other ones that struggle, that those that slide goes longer than expected. I think that the Wolves are fine. I think that they just need to sort of get the focus back a little bit and they'll be okay. But there's no disputing that right now they're in a little bit of a funk and they got to pull out of it.
And one of the things that, I've had this team in my power rankings, at least my top five for most of the year. Defense they've been a stalwart, number one in the NBA pretty much since the season started. It's on the offensive end that I have question marks just in terms of just how far this team can go. 19th right now in offensive rating. When you look at past champions, for the most part, these are top 10 offenses. So let's tackle this in two fronts. Number one, internally, what do you think is part of the issue offensively, internally, and how they can improve their rating just on the guys that are on the roster right now?
Yeah, there's two big areas that they're focused on. And the first one, and by far the most important, is they turn the ball over way too often. And so I believe they're 26th, 27th in turnovers right now. And that is not a recipe for success when you're talking about being a good offense in the league. And so they have talent with Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. Rudy Gobert is really efficient. Mike Conley. They have really good offensive players on their team. They are actually a very good shooting team. They're in the top 8 or 9 in field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. So when they get their shots and they shoot them, they make them and they have success. Their biggest problem is that they turn the ball over so often, especially in fourth quarters, that they lose the possession game by a wide margin. So their opponents night in and night out are taking 12, 14, 15 more shots than they are. And that is where you're seeing the offensive rating get depressed the most, is just the lack of opportunities for them to score because of their decision-making and their turnovers. The other thing that they're really trying to address internally is really kind of adding some more three-point volume to their offensive shot mix. They are a very good three-point shooting team, but they are toward the bottom third of the league in terms of 3-point attempts. They just don't have the gunners that just get up 8, 10, 12 threes in a game. That's why Karl Anthony Towns over the last week shooting a lot more threes is actually an encouraging step, even when he doesn't make a lot of them. You want to kind of get that to breed some more spacing into the offense. And we'll see if they address it even more come the trade deadline. But those are the two areas that they're really fixated on in terms of getting this offense going, because they are so dynamic from a talent standpoint. Throw Naz Reid in that mix as well as another really good offensive player. They just have to be smarter with their way they're playing and be a little bit more structured and disciplined in terms of getting the spacing to let everyone operate.
This sounds like like you need a little more organization in the offense. Another point guard, if you will. Maybe it's a reunion with I don't know, Tyus Jones. He's shooting the three ball pretty well. Or you think about somebody like Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz, or is this something that internally the T-Wolves can resolve?
Well, I do think that they are absolutely looking in the trade market. I don't think that it's a case where they say they have to make a move. Remember, they don't have a whole lot of assets to go out and get someone with the draft picks and the contracts on their roster. So deal making is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I do know that the Wolves are active, just out there looking and seeing what their options are. I think some of the names that you brought up would make sense if they can find a deal. I mean, really, I think there's two sort of prototypes of players they're looking for right now. One is that backup point guard, because the times that we've really seen them struggle is when Mike Conley has not been able to play. That they need someone to organize the offense, to get them good shots, to just help them play smarter in the half court. And when Conley is out, they really struggle in that area. So getting another point guard behind him to help manage that workload would be something that they're interested in. Another possibility is just kind of like a pure bucket getter, like a Jordan Clarkson, the old school Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams type of a player who can just come in and be a backcourt partner with Naz Reid, who is very dynamic offensively and can go off from a scoring standpoint, but having someone in the backcourt that can also do it and get their own shot, maybe spread the floor with the 3-point shooting, Alec Burks, somebody like that, just throwing names out there, microwave scorers. I think that could go a long way toward helping balance their first and second units and get them going offensively a little bit more too. So they're absolutely looking at all sorts of options. I don't think that there's anything close. I just think they're trying to evaluate the market right now and see if there is something that can fit between them and another team, them and a third team, and try and get something done.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alex.
No, the last question I got is do you have any concerns with regards to this offense in the playoffs? Because it seems like outside of Cat and Ant-Man, and at times Naz Reid, it just comes to a grinding halt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing you feel really good about is Anthony Edwards has already proven that he's a playoff performer. When the lights come on, he is ready to roll. He looked great in his first series against Memphis. Last year against Denver, I thought he was very, very impressive. And so he raises his level to another stage, and that's what you want out of your best players. So they feel really good about that. I do think that they need this last 35, 36 games of the season to continue working on the synergy, the connectivity, and figuring out their spacing. So as of right now, if they were to start the playoffs today, there would be huge, I think, questions about can their offense stay, kind of keep up with their defense and do it. But I do think that they're pretty confident that being in all of these close games, even some of the ones that they're losing, even like the fourth quarters that they're really giving leads away, is going to serve them well to just learn each other and figure out what has to happen. The good news for them is they don't have to start the playoffs right now. And so the goal will be over these last several months going into mid-April is to iron out a lot of these wrinkles. And I do think that most of the problems that they are facing right now are addressable. This is not a case where hey, you don't have that number one scorer, or you don't have a supporting role player for him, or you can't run pick and rolls, or, real like existential limitations. I don't think that they have that. I think it's more in the execution of what they're trying to do. And so they'll work hard to figure that out, and they have time to do that. And that's the fortunate thing for them.
Well, once again, we're talking to Jon Krawczynski, covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for The Athletic as well as Bally Sports. So to everybody in the chat, once again, hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. John, on Edwards, last year, one of the points of emphasis from Coach Chris Finch and the organization was to see how he can improve overall as a decision maker, when to pick and choose what's a good shot, what's not a good shot, how to make his teammates better. What have you seen from Ant-Man this season as compared to last in terms of improvements in those areas?
Yeah, he's gotten a lot better. I think everyone was expecting or hoping that he would take the leap coming out of the Team USA World Cup experience, coming out of that playoff loss to Denver. And for the most part, he has been everything that they could have wanted in that regard. He just the other night against San Antonio, he had 12 assists in the game. And so that shows that he has a desire to get his teammates involved. And there have been some very impressive plays in games, especially late in games, or more earlier in the season, where drives in, makes a really good pass to the corner to Mike Conley, waiting there for a wide open shot. He looks, to Jaden McDaniels all the time. So there has been a real, I think, progress in terms of his unselfishness, in terms of the way that he sees the floor, and he understands where the holes are going to be in a defense when they collapse on him. That's all been very, very good. I do think that he is still 22 years old and he is still learning. It's not a finished product yet. So there are games where he forces shots a little too much. There are games where he does want to go, 1-on-3 and really put everything on his shoulders, and he takes a tough contested shot that doesn't end up working out. There are games where he has too many turnovers, and that happens. But for the most part, when you watch him play, these are mistakes of youth and not mistakes that are inherent to who he is as a player. And so there's a lot of confidence internally that every time he goes through a situation like this, he learns a little bit more and he improves a little bit more. And so by and large, with everything that you look at with his game, it's been a huge leap forward and a very promising going into the second half of the season, going into the playoffs, and allowing him to really become the focal point of this franchise, which is what is happening kind of right before our eyes.
Now, not only has Ant-Man been the only guy who has stepped up his game this season, but it seems like Karl-Anthony Towns has been another guy as well. What's been the biggest difference for him this season than years past?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and Chris Finch has said that Karl-Anthony Towns has had to make the biggest sacrifices within this starting five. He moved from center, where he was an all-NBA center, to power forward to accommodate Rudy Gobert. And there has been no player on the Timberwolves roster that has been more willing to incorporate Gobert into what they're doing offensively than Karl-Anthony Towns. He's a very willing passer to Rudy Gobert. We just saw in Brooklyn the other night where the game-winning basket was a Towns lob to Rudy late that gave them that victory. And that sort of approach in terms of a face of the franchise level player really changing his game to accommodate is, I think, unique. And then you also look at his partnership with Anthony Edwards. Edwards has gotten a lot of the hype, has gotten a lot of the press clippings, and there's been a lot of discussion about his ascendance. And there are other players of Towns' caliber who would not be happy with that, maybe there'd be some jealousy or some bitterness about that. Towns has not displayed any of that at all. He and Edwards get along very well. They have a really good relationship and a lot of respect for each other. And so I just think the maturity that Towns has shown in sort of taking on a different role, where for the first 7-8 years of his time in Minnesota, he was the sun in the solar system. And he had a quote earlier this year saying that he's not the sun now, he's one of the planets orbiting it. And so I just think that his ability to acclimate to the changing landscape and do it willingly has made a big difference for the Timberwolves. I think that right now in this portion of the season, he has to kind of get back to playing a little bit of better defense like he did earlier in the season that really keyed that number 1 ranking. But from an offensive standpoint, now that he's shooting the 3 a lot more, he's scoring just an incredible amount of points. The 62 against Charlotte, backed it up with a couple of 27-point nights on the road at Washington and Brooklyn. He's really resumed his efficiency on offense, and that's a big part of it. So all in all, that's been really good. Now he is one of many players on the team that needs to kind of tighten the screws defensively again and kind of help the Wolves get back to that identity that got them to first place in the West.
It's very interesting with Towns because for so long he gets flack for kind of having that kind of happy-go-lucky attitude, and former players or fans kind of criticize him. But then you could also make the case that it's that same attitude where it just comes with no ego, and he's able to sacrifice for Ant-Man to be the number 1 option on the team, or he's able to sacrifice for another big man in Rudy Gobert to make sure that they're in sync both offensively and defensively. So, you got to commend Towns for his effort there, and then his play on the court. He's even better than last year, and going to be, once again, an important piece as they look for playoff success.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he says some stuff that makes you roll your eyes sometimes. He says some corny stuff and things like that. And I think that gets that he's not Kobe Bryant. He's not going to be like sitting there and stewing and just trying to come up with inspirational memes. Like that's not his personality. And to his credit, I don't think he's not trying to be that now. And so, yeah, there are times, where fans will see something that he says or, kind of see the more happy-go-lucky attitude of it and scoff at a little bit. But when you look at what he's been through the entirety of his career in Minnesota, there are very, very few all-star caliber, all NBA caliber players who would have gone through all of the turnover in the front office and the coaching staff, all of the dysfunction, the Jimmy Butler situation, so many of these other things, and said, I'm going to stick this out. I'm going to stay with this, and I'm going to keep going. And Towns never requested a trade. He's never asked out of it. He's basically now really acclimated to another changing environment. And now he's in a position, I think, where he can sort of put aside the label of he's a big stats, small wins player. And right now he's on a team that has been 1 or 2 in the West the whole way. And if he continues to play the way that he has, and if this team kind of rights itself coming out of this little funk here, and they finish in the top 2 or 3 in the West and they win in the playoffs, whether his stats are the same or not, he's going to have a chance to sort of shut up all those critics of you can't win with a player like Karl Anthony Towns. That's the thing that he's sort of been battling against over the last several years. And he's got a long way to go. This team has a long way to go to disprove that notion or to kind of wipe all of that away. But certainly through the first half of this season, he has been impactful toward this team's winning at a level that he has not been previously in his career. And I think that is the side of him that is unique or different from earlier in his career that people are starting to take notice of.
So CP, as John's pointed out, Cat is doing so well. We could throw all those
throw it out the window.
Anthony Towns to the Knicks to bed.
Listen,
we're done.
We got to get our guy's shoulder back right, man. I don't know. We don't know if he's in a sling, if he's headed for the surgeon table. We don't know. We're on edge right now in New York, but good to hear Towns is doing his thing in Soda, man. Definitely good to hear that, man.
For sure. But hey, as you guys know, I mean, as long as CAA is running that thing in New York, like there's always going to be those rumors that come up, whether it's with Towns or anybody else that is represented by that agency. That's just the way of the NBA world. So I don't expect anything to quiet down anytime soon with any of those guys. That's the way that this league operates. So
sure.
So more graphics to come through. Great. That's all we need.
That's right.
But anywho, John, outside of the Timberwolves' big three, which is Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, who's been the standout this year that's impressed you the most?
Well, I mean, I think that you can really make a case that Mike Conley is their MVP. It just in terms of what he brings to the table from a leadership, maturity standpoint. Oh, by the way, he's also shooting like 43% from 3-point range. Like, this guy is more than a 36-year-old sort of caretaker. He's still a very, very good player at this stage of his career. And you can see that every time Conley misses a game, outside of the one in Boston where they took the Celtics to overtime and almost won that game, they look really different as a team without him on the floor. And so I do think that there is an expectation that, hey, at this stage of his career, maybe he's a lower minutes guy. Maybe he's just you get him out there and have him play well for a little bit and then get him some rest. But Mike Conley is essential to what this team does on both ends of the court, in the locker room, making big shots, making the right reads and the right passes. And so I always knew that he was a really, really good player, but you just wondered at this stage of his career, was he still that good? And the answer is yes, he is still that good. And so I think that has been if not a surprise, certainly maybe the under the radar thing, that if you're a fan in New York watching this and you don't watch every Timberwolves game and you're seeing the Edwards highlights and you're seeing Towns' 62 and Rudy's blocks and all this, you may not see that Mike Conley had 12 points, 8 assists, and no turnovers in 29 minutes. Like that's the thing that goes unnoticed. But when you're close to the team and you're watching it day in and day out, it's just absolutely essential to what they're doing and so valuable.
But
it's funny because I feel like
go ahead.
No, it's funny because it felt like, when after the Gobert trade, like I did a crazy 3-team deal. I forget who it was for the Knicks. And I was like, yo, Conley still got some legs. This is the guy the Lakers should go after, to organize the offense, help LeBron James out and give you some 3-point shooting. Got a little bit of pushback, but hey, I think he's still a good hooper to this day.
Yeah, really, really good hooper. And I do think that, look, D'Lo has played well for the Lakers lately. He was on a team that went to the Western Conference Finals last year. But I think that, if the Lakers could do that over, would they just take Mike Conley instead of going D'Lo? I think there's a real possibility of that. So, I think that trade, when you look at, what Tim Connolly did in that maneuver where traded D'Angelo Russell out, got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Mike Conley, and 3 second-round picks, it's a home run trade because Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been a just ultra valuable two-way player for them off the bench as well, and filling in for Conley when he's out. So just an excellent move by Conley there.
Yeah, I like Alexander's game a lot. But on the Conley front, while one man can't, police the entire team or locker room, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is Chris Finch and his calls for this team to be a bit more mature. Last week, the situation where Carl's was going for 60. There were reports that the team they were trying to have him catch Embiid, and so the offense got a little chaotic in the fourth as they were trying to stat pad for him. You had the incident with Gobert punching slow-mo and Jaden McDaniels hurting his hand. What do you think about that? The coach calling for this team to be a bit more mature, especially as expectations have heightened now.
Sure, yeah, and whenever a coach is that blunt in his public criticism, you do wonder how players will react to that. And there have been coaches who have lost locker rooms with that kind of approach before, but I've had discussions with pretty much every important piece of that Wolves locker room about Chris Finch really kind of being frontal with his criticism of their maturity out in that Charlotte game. And they all just said, hey, whatever he said publicly to you guys, he had already told us privately. And so I do think that there is a respect that the players have for Chris Finch. And I think that what Finch recognized in that game was that this had been something that was building really for the last few weeks. They're 8-7 in January, so they haven't been great. There's been a gradual slippage, and then he saw that Charlotte game as sort of the final like 5-alarm fire, and so he had tried privately to warn them, to kind of coach them through it, to really trying to get their focus back several times. And clearly he had felt like he tried every other approach. And so now it was time to put it out into the public sphere. And I thought that most of the criticism was right on. I mean, when you look at how the Timberwolves played in the fourth quarter of that game, kind of shot hunting for Towns, and really being passive for most of the game, and just only passing it to Towns rather than looking for his shot. Letting a lot of distractions seep in and taking a bad team for granted. Those were all glaring things. And so you back that up with what they did in San Antonio the other night, which is kind of similar in terms of their approach against a terrible team. And I think it speaks to a coach saying, okay, yes, these are the dog days of the season, but we have to refocus and you have to get back on task. And if I don't say something, if I don't really kind of hold your feet to the fire and hold you accountable, then the chances of this going further and further only increase. And so I think Chris Finch, it's not something that he does very often at all. But I just think that he felt that the timing was such that I have to let these guys have it a little bit publicly and let them sit in it. And the players all owned up to it and said, he was right. I understand his frustration. We have to be better. So we'll see if that message kind of starts to sink in tonight in Oklahoma City.
What has Chris Finch done differently outside of holding his players accountable? This team made some noise. Talk about the 21-22 season where they get into the play-in, make the playoffs, and it was just kind of a big stepping stone for that season. Last year, it seems like they take a step back. They were slightly above 500, but it felt out of rhythm, especially with the addition of Rudy Gobert. Now we're talking about a team that's top 2 in the Western Conference. Outside of just holding them accountable, what else has Finch done for this group to make him so good?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing, Al, is he has really instilled a defensive mentality in the entire group. He has looked at this roster and understood, with Gobert, with Jaden McDaniels, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, with a lot of these guys, with Kyle Anderson, they have a team that is better suited to win games on the defensive end than on the offensive end. And that is a situation that is very unique in the league. I mean, this is an offense first league now. Yeah. So you have to be very confident in your own abilities to zag the way that the Timberwolves have zagged so far. And to his credit, he has hired a great staff with Elson Turner, with Kevin Hansen, with a bunch of really good, smart assistants. Chris Hines and Pablo Prigioni, all these guys have really kind of helped embrace this uncommon approach in the league. And so if you see it most nights, this team is bought in defensively in a way that very few other teams in the league are. And they are number one by a wide margin in between, the second place team. Certainly when you look at the gap between 1 and 10, it's light years. And so he is playing really to his roster's strengths. And I do think that he had, the interesting thing is that he came into this job with the reputation of being an offensive specialist, of working in New Orleans and Denver and Toronto with the offenses and getting those things running really well. And so kind of similar to what, when Tibbs was in Minnesota, he was, cast as a defensive specialist, but really the Timberwolves were great offensively during his time here and not so great defensively. Yeah. And so I think that Finch's ability to adapt to what his roster is equipped to do is probably his best attribute, because 2 years ago when they went to the playoffs, he had like kind of a ragtag group that played defense in an entirely different way than they play defense today with Rudy Gobert in the middle of it. And so you just see a coach that is able to kind of change things on the fly to meet the needs of his roster. Now, he has to do a little bit better job offensively, especially in the fourth quarters. He has things to improve on. But all in all, to get a too big roster like this to be top 2 in the West, I think has been a really impressive job by him.
Once again, we're talking to Timberwolves insider Jon Krawczynski, who covers the team for The Athletic as well as Bally Sports. So to everybody in the chat, once again, hit that thumbs up button for you boys. Also, share these videos on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to the channel as well. All right, John, final question for you. Big game tonight, battle for number 1 in the West, a rematch between the Timberwolves and the OKC Thunder. You had Ant-Man chirping back and forth about the preferential treatment for SGA. A lot of the fans want to see a potential rivalry budding there, but how did the Timberwolves bounce back against a red-hot OKC offense here?
Yeah, I think, I think it's actually a bad scenario for them in terms of OKC just lost to Detroit yesterday. And so, I think that may have woke them up just a little bit. And I think they're going to come in a little bit ornery to this game and really ready to go. So the Wolves, who have really, like we've said, for most of this kind of been treading water the last, week or so, they better be totally on their game or else it could get ugly in OKC. Now, the thing about it, and when you talk about a rivalry, these two teams have played 3 games this year, and 2 of them have been very, very close. And the Wolves could easily be up 2-1 in the series. They're down 2-1 right now. But I think that I like the way that these two teams match up in terms of they do things totally differently. The Wolves want to play big. They want to beat you at the rim. They want to use their rebounding and their defense to really kind of shrink the game, shrink the floor, and win that way. Whereas the Thunder, with SGA, they like to play smaller, and even Holmgren, as he's super tall but is a thin and skinny center, they play it wide open. They move the ball around, they shoot it from the perimeter, and they have SGA dive into the rim. And so they are contrasting styles. And I think really what it comes down to for the Wolves is not necessarily Gilgeous-Alexander, because he's played great in all 3 of their matchups. It's, can they limit the Lou Dorts of the world, the Kenrich Williamses and of the world from really kind of going off? And they were able to do that in their one victory. They were able to do that in the game where they almost won the other earlier this month at home. But if the Wolves can do a good job of making other players beat them and let SGA get his points, but make sure that none of the other supporting cast just really has a huge night, then I think they can go in and win this game. If the Thunder hit 17, 18 threes and they have everyone in rhythm and going and they're getting open looks, then it's going to be a long night for Minnesota.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching. Going to be the game of the night for us. But, John, we definitely appreciate the time. And the Bally Sports thing, was that new this year, your TV debut?
Just kind of dipping my toe in the water a little bit. They had a need for a sideline reporter here and there. I'm going to do a couple more of them. And so it's been fun. Kat was very cool the other night. Kind of getting excited with things. And, I'm trying to stay relevant here, guys, in this changing media world. And getting on TV a little bit helps a little as well. So that's been fun.
Yeah. Well, spread your wings, man. To drop your content on Twitter. We'll be sure to share it. But we definitely appreciate the insights that you give us here. Hopefully we can reconvene come playoff time and see how this Timberwolves team is geared up to make a run.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot. Enjoy that Knicks season. It's been a fun one. So
thanks a lot, John.
Appreciate it.
That was our guy, Jon Krawczynski, Timberwolves insider for The Athletic, as well as Bally Sports, man. Salute to everybody in the chat. We hope you guys enjoyed today's show as much as we did. Remember that this show is available in audio podcast format, so no reason to miss it. You can catch it on all major podcast platforms, and be sure to hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. Once again, CP the Franchise, Alex Rotaros, Jon Krawczynski here. Have a great day, everybody, and let's see what happens tonight. Big game tonight between the Timberwolves and the Thunder. We'll see you guys on Wednesday on the NBA Report. Peace.